What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to do a react to Metatron. Can an Italian understand Esperanto, and can you? Let's test it. Well, obviously I can understand Esperanto because I've been speaking this language for 15 plus years now. It is a big part of my life, and it's in fact the thing that got me into languages in the first place. So I'm very curious to see what Metatron has got to say. Now, I'm reacting to this video at this time because I've done reactions to Metatron before. He's reacted to me, and I've had Esperanto speakers jump down into my comment section and go, hey, Evildea, what do you think about Metatron's take on Esperanto? And normally when Esperanto speakers ask me to do a react to a video about Esperanto, it's usually because that video presents Esperanto in a bad light. Although I guess it's not always true, so I'm a little bit curious to see what Metatron's got to say right now. Now, I will be like straight up honest about these types of things. Often what happens is that people who know a lot about languages generally don't know much about Esperanto, and they can take some hot takes, so I'm quite used to that. Now, I'm not saying that's what Metatron's going to say. I'm just like mentally preparing myself right now because I do like the guy. I like him a lot. I love his content. I love his no bullshit approach to things, although I swear a little bit more than him.
Hello noble ones and welcome to Metatron's Academy. Today, in this new episode of this series,
It looks like Metatron's actually sweating here. It must be really hot when he made this.
I'd like to try and see if, as a native Italian speaker, I can understand the language called Esperanto.
He will most likely be able to understand a good portion of it because the vowels in Esperanto are pretty much in line with Italian vowels, and something like 70% of the language comes from Romance languages, and a large portion of that, probably something like 40% or something, comes almost directly from Latin. And I know Metatron is like a massive fan of Latin, so he's going to be able to pick up that as well.
Now, for those of you who don't know what Esperanto is, to give you a very small and brief summary, Esperanto is an artificially made language created by linguists in the late 1800s.
Okay, so he's wrong there. It wasn't created by linguists. It was created by an individual. His name was Zamenhof. He lived in Poland, which at the time was part of the Russian Empire. And he learnt languages. You would basically call him a polyglot by today's standards. He learnt languages because he wanted to connect with other cultures, and he created Esperanto. But he was not a linguist. He was what we would just call an eye doctor, basically. I don't even know if linguists were like a job that you could do at that time in history. There probably was some social circles within, upper nobility or whatever, where people, they could pursue that career path, but I have actually no idea when the first linguist came into existence. In fact, before we continue, let's find out. Okay, so here I'm facing a little bit of a difficulty, and maybe someone who's into linguistics can actually clarify in the comment section, but apparently, like, this guy is kind of acknowledged as, like, one of the first true linguists. That could be completely wrong, because I literally spent 2 minutes on Google looking this information up, but there have been people who have performed, obviously, the role that linguists perform, going all the way back into ancient history type of thing, so I guess it's kind of hard to figure out who was, like, the first career linguist.
Hundreds to tie and formulate, construct, build, design a language that could be very easy to learn, very simple in its conjugations, declinations, rules without exceptions, but also using it as a common ground.
Okay, so I just want to clarify one thing. That's how it was created. But when watching this video and watching videos about Esperanto, remember, this is a 130-year-old language, okay? There have been multiple generations of speakers. So the original intentions, although they're basically what he's saying there, they don't always map onto how the language is used today. Just to be aware.
Heavily influenced by Romance languages and European languages.
Yeah, so basically it's like 70 to 80% is from Romance languages, then you've got like 10 plus coming from Germanic languages, although that would kind of be starting to skew now with English being a big influence on Esperanto. Basically, early Esperanto was highly influenced by French, modern Esperanto highly influenced by English, and obviously its own internal word building systems. But then you've got like another 10% which comes from Slavic, Hebrew, these types of languages. And then a kind of a tiny little bit here and there come from languages like, for example, Japanese. You've got hashio, which means chopstick in Esperanto.
In other words, it's a language that was specifically made to make it very easy for people, both from the Romance language family and the Germanic language family, to be able to learn it, even though, to be honest, once you examine it, the reality is that it's very heavily Romance language influenced.
He's completely correct about that, it is.
The language did get some momentum, but then the growth was blocked during World War II for obvious reasons. Now, personally, I never was really interested in Esperanto. I'm not interested in artificial languages. The overall idea when it comes...
You see, this is where me and Metatron diverge quite a bit. I love constructed languages. I've dived into them deeper than probably any natural language. However, we also have a lot of crossover points. Like, for example, Metatron is studying and learning Chinese. I'm studying learning Chinese. I'm also a little bit interested in Latin, and he's massively into Latin. So it's like, you know, that you get that Venn diagram of like interests. We kind of got like a little crossover in the middle just here.
Comes to simple communication was sound, I suppose, but then again, we already have English for that. And
well, when Esperanto was created, we already had French. Okay, so French was the international language. English was not. It was growing importance at the time of Esperanto's creation, but it just shows you how old this language is. Like, I know in the grand scheme of human history, 130 years is not long, but when you think about it in constructed language time, and languages that are now actually, you know, passed on with native speakers, because there is native speakers of Esperanto now, that's actually quite a fascinating period of history.
The whole section that had to do with diplomatic affairs, I was really into it. Which means I have no training in it whatsoever, and I've never heard it spoken. So how about we do just that and see how much I can understand with zero training.
You know what I want to do one day? Like, I don't know when this will happen or if it will ever happen, but if I ever do meet up with Metatron one day, we should totally do a video where I try to speak to him in Esperanto and he tries to speak to me in Italian or even Latin, and let's see if we can, like, maintain a conversation. I reckon it would be cooler in Latin.
Let's go.
Esperanto.
Numbers.
Oh god, this has to be like the worst Esperanto-looking film ever. Oh, I hate these style graphics, man. This is like Esperanto overboard. Like, what is it with all these like green stars, green colors, green this? This is the equivalent, okay, of, you know how you have that one day a year, what is it, St. Patrick's Day, where the Irish come out and they've got like, it's just like overblown Irish attire type of thing, and you're like, yeah, that's not how Irish people dress, but that's what they do on St. Patrick's Day. This is literally that in Esperanto.
Uno, dos, tres, quatro,
Oh, that kvar was like a little bit rough there.
quin, ses, sep, ok, now, dec.
Greetings and phrases.
Salud.
God damn it. You picked the worst film to do a review of, Metatron.
Okay, so yeah, all the numbers are pretty easy, pretty straightforward, very similar. There's a lot of common ground, as you can see.
I've actually noticed a lot of common ground between Esperanto numbers and Spanish numbers because I'm currently doing a Dreaming Spanish challenge, and like that has helped me quite a bit.
A little closer to Latin, perhaps, but sure, yeah, understand those.
Greetings and phrases.
Saluton. Bonam matenon. Bonam vesperon. Bonam nocton.
Interesting. So, out
I noticed this speaker here isn't really hitting their R sounds, just to be aware.
of these, of course, because they're put in order, the one that I don't understand, I think it's good afternoon, bona vesperum. I don't know where they're getting that one from. But the others, sure, once again, it's like a simplified version of Latin, if you will.
Gis. Adiau. Gis la revido.
These last ones kind of sounded a little Portuguese/Spanish, but then again, this is one of the problems with with an artificial language like Esperanto. There isn't really one correct way to pronounce it. I mean, if I go at it as an Italian, and you say it, you pronounce it.
No, that's incorrect. There is a correct way to pronounce Esperanto. Like, okay, it's hard to explain, but if you go into the Wikipedia page, you will see that there is specific ways that you are meant to pronounce the sounds. Now, because there's a lot of secondary speakers and the number of fluent speakers isn't as high as the number of not fluent speakers, obviously, you're going to hear a lot more variation than you would with a native language. However, there is a specific way you need to pronounce Esperanto if you want to be considered, you know, a fluent speaker type of thing. But again, we are used to lots of speakers speaking it with different accents.
Based on the pronunciation rules of Spanish, Portuguese, French. I mean, at the end of the day, there isn't a native way to speak it, so
Well, there's not a native way, but there is an accepted standard. Although there is native speakers of Esperanto, we don't deem them as the standard of Esperanto because they make up actually a small fraction of the community. But there is something that's deemed a standard, and there are speakers out there who people look up to and go, yep, that's perfect.
I think all would be, in theory, correct. So perhaps this speaker now gave it a little bit of a Portuguese/Spanish flair to it. But
Like I said, when I was listening to that speaker, their R pronunciation was kind of a little bit soft there at the end of words.
I mean, it is what it is. Let's go.
Dunia and the Enchanted Forest.
Dunia kaj la sorĉa arbaro. Antaŭ multaj jaroj, en suda regiono de Esperantujo, loĝis infanino apud arbaro, kies nomo estis Dunia.
That's fine.
Dunia loĝis en granda bela domo kun ŝia patro, ŝia patrino kaj ŝia frateto Mumu. Dunia
So the first part I didn't understand much, to be honest. Then I believe they said something about a big house, because I think they pronounce it domo, which sounds like domus in Latin. This would be very easy for a Romanian to pick up as well. In Italian we say casa, but then when just like in English, we say domestico, like domestic, and that's the root with domus, which is
I've actually never noticed that, like, that it is. Yeah, like domestic. Totally never noticed that before.
still there. So I understand that, and I think she's living with brothers and sisters, maybe?
estis lerta, inteligenta kaj tre laborema. Ŝi amis legi dikajn librojn kaj pasi multajn horojn en la biblioteko de ŝia patro.
Of this,
Yeah, the pronunciation here of their Esperanto sometimes kind of feels off. Like there is some, like that biblioteco. There was something going on there.
this part, I think this Dunia person
But again, it's totally understandable.
seems to be like an intelligent girl, and I believe she says, the person said that she spends a lot of time in the library. That would be my
I actually can't remember what they said because I was too focused on like the pronunciation and stuff.
guess.
Ofte Dunia iris al arbaro por renkonti ŝian amikon Puko, kiu loĝis ene de sorĉa arbego. Puko estis juna sorĉisto kaj kune kun Dunia protektis la plantojn kaj la bestojn de la arbaro kontraŭ malbona sorĉistino kiu loĝis en malnovan nigran kastelo.
Yeah, now they lost me. I mean, they're talking about a castle, they're talking about some kind of exorcism or spell.
This is actually just fascinating for me watching him try figure it out in real time. I'm assuming he's purposely not looking at the English, obviously, here. But like, it's always fascinating for me to see if other people can understand my language.
Protection spell, but against something. So of course I don't know the premises of this tale, so I have to rely entirely on how much I can
I wish he would look at like an actual natural conversation. There's plenty of recorded natural conversations in Esperanto because this is a very artificial, slow story, you know. It's not like how Esperanto would be spoken if you're out on the street type of thing.
recognize the words. And so far I am struggling a bit. Whatever they did to try and make it easier, I know the only word I know in Esperanto is the word for field, which I know is campo. And that one is easy
That's so random.
because it's campo in Italian as well. And I
Oh.
suppose in a few other languages, even in Greek, there is a similarity. There's a similar word to that. But that one will be a little harder, I think, for an English speaker because, yes, you have the word camp, but it's usually understood slightly differently. So it might become a false friend.
Tiu tago, Dunia preparis sin por eliri kaj renkonti ŝian amikon. Ŝi enmetis en ŝia tornistro manĝaĵon, sorĉan bastonon kaj ŝnuron.
Okay, so whatever this linguist did to try and make it easier doesn't seem like it's working with me. It does seem like it would maybe it would require less effort than any other language. If
Okay, so I think there's a bad assumption here. So Esperanto is meant to be made easy once you learn the rules of the language and how things fit together. So like the rules are not that complex. But if you haven't learnt the rules, looking at it is actually very difficult because it's not like it's... Okay, what you're probably thinking of here, Metatron, is more interlingua. So interlingua is another constructed language, and the way it's designed is to be easily recognizable to anyone who knows a Romance language or, you know, any other language within Europe, just be able to instantly pick it out because it made the words and forms be as close to as many as possible. The downside is that it's a bit of a mess with pronunciation and other things like that, and it's actually harder due to that in some ways, especially if you're not a speaker of one of these languages. Esperanto, on the other hand, is there are set rules. Once you learn the rules, then it all falls into place. But if you don't know the rules, then it's probably going to like appear like gibberish to you.
if he made it exceptionally regular, if you wish, like without irregular verbs, without exceptions. So I guess you still have to put some work in it. What are we gathering here?
Yeah, you definitely do. Like, it's still a language.
So far, it's not a language that just because it was made with the idea of being easy, so they could be learned by anyone in Europe. And then you just understand it without any...
I think what's throwing him off the most right now is the endings. Because in Esperanto, the endings, which are usually always like at least one or more suffixes, they will represent what the word actually is, like its grammatical position, such as a noun, adjective, adverb, these types of things, its case and all that type of stuff. And then also you can stack them. And once you start stacking them, they don't look like anything like what you would expect a normal European word to look like, and then you just get lost. But once you know all these little suffixes, it all makes complete sense.
Training, because I'm not understanding it much. In fact, I understand Spanish more easily than Esperanto. That's the first thing.
I reckon if Metatron did a review of someone speaking interlingua, he would probably instantly understand all of it.
We are noticing. So this already means, I don't know, there is something they did. Maybe they should have made it easier, to be honest. But yeah, let's continue. It does sound nice, but when I say...
Also, Esperanto is more recognizable in written form. When you see it written down, it's almost immediately recognizable, large portions of it. And the reason being is because it was invented at a time when people primarily communicated by writing letters. So they preferred forms that were actually more in line with the written language than they did with the spoken language. So it's like when you see it written, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that I understand what that word is. But if you hear it, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound like that, because like obviously the phonology of Esperanto is very regular, and that was kind of like a secondary thing opposed to like the written form.
Sounds nice. Again, it's artificial. Is it sounding nice because of the native tongue of the person who's trying to read it, and maybe it would sound completely different if someone else did?
Okay, his statement here about, if it sounds nice or not, that's down to the eye of the beholder type of thing. It's like, what do you like? I like the sound of Esperanto. I find it to be very beautiful, especially when it's used in songs and poems and stuff like that. And funnily enough, like I'm studying Chinese, I've only just started to appreciate the sounds of Chinese. But when I first started learning it, I thought Chinese was not a very nice sounding language at all. But I pushed through that due to other reasons. And now I actually find it to be quite cool.
Very probable.
Cian accompanis ŝin. Ŝi eniris en la arbaron, kaj subite aperis teruran monstron. Sed Dunia rapide grimpis arbon, kaj surbranĉe prenis sian bastonon.
Okay, let's do something fun. So if you don't speak Esperanto in the comments, write down what languages you speak and what language you think it sounds like. Or not even necessarily what it sounds like, because I've done that before. Instead, write down how much you understood of it.
Kaj ekris fajron, kaj la monstro estis fulmita per fajrlumo.
No idea. No, I think she said that there is a monster, of course, and then this monster is, I don't know, trying to get Dunia, I suppose, but I'm guessing the verb, and then she took something like a branch to cast something like a spell, maybe, but it's
But here's the interesting thing. He's actually getting the general gist of pretty much most things so far. So that's actually quite impressive.
complete, like I'm trying to guess from a few roots of my knowledge of Latin, but it's not...
Yeah, see, it's Latin that's helping him out the most here.
enough. I'm not particularly invested in it, I have to say, because you see, one of the things that make languages so fun to explore, to learn, is the culture. But there is no culture in Esperanto.
Okay, this is definitely an incorrect statement. I'll let him finish his thoughts right now, but we'll get back to this.
Because there is no country, there is no people that created it naturally as a natural process or phenomenon. Therefore, there not being any culture in it, and it being instead just a means to an end. It's a tool, it's a utensil.
Okay, so this was true when Esperanto was created. It had no culture. However, after 130 years, it has developed a very distinct culture in its own way. So you just got to think about it logically. Let's say someone's great-great-grandfather learned Esperanto, and I've met people like this. And then they married someone else who also learned Esperanto. And they basically spent their time in the Esperanto community, maybe translating works, writing original works, whatever. And then because they both loved Esperanto, they taught it to their kids. And now it's become the language of their kids. Obviously, their kids learn the local language. Now, maybe their kids, because of their contacts with Esperanto, because they're great-grandparents, they then start meeting other Esperanto speakers from other countries. Same thing, repeat. And now you're down to 3 generations. I think there may even be 4th generations now. But I know there's at least 3 generations of Esperanto speakers. And when I went to Germany, I actually stayed with a 3rd generation Esperanto speaking family, and I remember watching the mum having like fights with her kids in Esperanto about, you know, the most normal, mundane, everyday tasks, but she had bookshelves full of Esperanto books, some I've never even seen before. And you could see for her that this was a very important part of her culture and her history. And she would talk about how her great-grandfather or someone or other met some famous Esperanto author who I'd heard about. And like, I have no connection with this person. So it's like we have a shared culture.
It's void of interest for me. I wouldn't spend 10 minutes on learning Esperanto. I'd rather learn English, Spanish, and Mandarin, and now I can communicate.
You know, here's a great example, okay? So I like to say Esperanto is equal to a minority language in culture and scale, okay? Now, I'm going to do something that might piss off a few people, but I just want to give you guys a good representation of actually how much its culture has developed. So right here is a blog post. This is about the 5 periods of Esperanto literature. So Esperanto has gone through a history of basically literature periods where different styles of literature were basically in vogue, certain like patterns and formulas were like developed over time, etc., etc. So you've got the first period, obviously when the language was created, and then the first writers came in, started writing. Mainly they were doing translations, but then they started doing original works, and you got the secondary period, third period, fourth period, etc., etc. And I've actually got a book in my bookshelf. I can't pull it out right now because it's packed away. I'm planning to move to my new house, but it's that thick, and it's called A Comprehensive History of Esperanto Literature. Now, if I go to UEA, which is a website, it's basically an association for Esperanto speakers. Mainly old people are part of this association, sorry. Not too many young people. But if you have a look right here, they're saying that have 8,100 different products, okay? Which consists of 7,300 books. And you'll notice this word if you speak Latin. Now, that's 7,300 books that they have. There is a lot of Esperanto books that are no longer published. You can't get your hands on unless you go to an Esperanto library. Yes, they exist. We have one here in Sydney. It's in the Esperanto house, which is like kind of like a community hall type of thing. We have a whole level of the house, which is basically just Esperanto literature. Lots of it you can't get anywhere anymore. And in fact, if it wasn't there, it's probably lost to history. We've lost a lot of Esperanto stuff because there's not that many publishers out there who want to publish Esperanto books. Now, you get an idea. 7,300 books that are currently available for purchase from probably the biggest bookstore for Esperanto speakers, although I don't know, maybe Amazon has overtaken this. So that's for this language, 130 years old. Now we have Irish over here, okay? Irish has 190,000, can speak the language quite well, which I would put probably in line with Esperanto. Esperanto and Irish probably have similar numbers of speakers, although Irish would have more native speakers. So if we have a look how many books are published in Irish, we have 12,000 entries. So Irish is probably just over, just under double of what Esperanto has. And this is from the 17th century. Now, I'm not trying to say, Irish is not like an impressive language because it's got so few amounts of books. I'm actually trying to show you that for the number of speakers for each language, it's actually quite impressive how big Esperanto's culture is, and it's still rapidly growing. Now, I know Irish has historically been, obviously pushed, it's been oppressed, etc., etc. I'm not talking to that. I just want to show a comparison of speakers to literature, and therefore a representation of their written culture, compared with Esperanto, speakers to literature and written culture. So it is quite fascinating that these are two languages, probably with similar amount of speakers, although Irish has way more native speakers and has a longer history, and therefore has more books, but respectively, it's actually quite similar.
With the majority of people in the world, not to mention Esperanto is completely useless when you're trying to use it to communicate with like Asia, or even the Slavic word.
Okay, so it's useless in the fact if they don't speak it, then you can't speak it. But there's plenty of Esperanto speakers in Asia. I've actually done multiple videos where I've gone over. I've met with Esperanto speakers over there, and they've taken me around. There's Esperanto libraries over there. You can study Esperanto at universities in China. There's entire courses around this. In fact, some of the biggest supporters of Esperanto are like the Chinese government, funnily enough. And then you've also got religious movements in Japan, Oomoto, which is a religious movement. For them, Esperanto is their version of Latin, okay? It is very important to their religious movement.
From that point of view, like Russia, so far not so good. Let's try another video with an actual person.
So I think the issue here is Metatron's probably stepped a little bit too far outside of what he knows. Now, I love Metatron as a person. I'm not shitting on him. I'm just here, clarifying these things. And these are things I've had to clarify many, many times before. So it doesn't bother me. I like to educate people about Esperanto. It is my hobby. So when people do make these types of mistakes, I like to come out and show them, actually it's this way. I'm not here to try and make you look bad or anything, because the vast majority of people know nothing about Esperanto.
Speaking maybe coming from a different place. Let's go.
Saluton de
She's a native speaker. I think I've met her once before.
Budapesto, Hungario, mi estas Stella, kaj la lingvo kiun mi parolas estas Esperanto.
So she's from Hungary and the language she speaks is Esperanto.
So now I know she said she introduced herself, and she said she's from Hungary, Budapest, and then she said that the language she's speaking is Esperanto.
That was actually pretty good.
Estas Esperanto. Zamenhof en la deknaŭa jarcento kreis tiun ĉi artefaritan lingvon.
Okay, now she asked what is Esperanto, and then she said the name of the guy who made it. Then she said the date, but I did not recognize anything past 1000. So numbers too, even though the first numbers from 1 to 10 were pretty easy to distinguish, it seems like when you go into hundreds and dates, I lose it completely. No idea.
Well, the funny thing is, numbers with any language are difficult, even when you know how to pronounce them, and you even know how to understand them individually. Like, even to this day, when people say dates in Chinese, it can take me a little bit to capture them, even though, the general conversational language I'm fine with. I feel like numbers just compress a lot of information into a very compact form, and therefore are harder.
I know it's in the late 1800s, but if I hadn't, I wouldn't have recognized it. And then, of course, she's saying it's an artificial language.
Kiu estas mia denaska lingvo.
So she's saying, this is my native language.
Denaska signifas ke miaj gepatroj ambaŭ, fakte, parolis al mi la lingvon ekde mia naskiĝo.
So both of her parents had spoken Esperanto with her since she was born.
Do mi vere povas diri ke tiu ĉi lingvo estas parto de mia vivo.
So it really is a language that's part of her life.
Ne estas hobio, ne estas iu eta afero, ĝi estas vere ĉiutaga uzo por mi.
So she's saying it's not a hobby, it's not something like that. This is something that I need to use pretty much every day.
Do por kio mi uzas Esperanto?
Yeah, the only thing I understood here is why do I use Esperanto. She said something that is like part of her life, said a few other things that I did not catch at all.
Kompreneble mi uzas ĝin por kio ajn mi uzas lingvojn, ĉu ne?
So she's just saying, I use it for everything. Whatever you would use a language for, she uses it for that.
Mi aŭskultas muzikon, mi tre ŝatas babiladi kun miaj amikoj, voĉe aŭ...
Yeah, she really likes talking with her friends, etc. And by the way, my camera just ran out of power just for a second then, so I just swapped the battery.
It's interesting that she said amikoi. So I believe probably the E at the end is plural. That's what I'm guessing. She uses it with her friends. So amico, amikoi, maybe.
Yeah, he actually picked it up. That's quite impressive.
Something like that. Sounds a little Greek actually when you do it that way.
Mi ankaŭ verkas iomete en Esperanto, mi faras podcastojn kaj organizas Esperantajn renkontiĝojn.
So she's written, she does podcasts, and she's also organized Esperanto meetups.
Mi vere povas diri al vi ke Esperanto kulturo estas tio kio pleje riĉigis mian vivon.
So she's saying here that Esperanto culture is the thing that has enriched her life the most.
Mi tre ĝojas havi tiom da internaciaj kontaktoj dank al la lingvo.
So she's very happy to have so many friends, international friends, due to the language.
Again, missed most of it. She said something about international contact or communication. Okay, so of this, the one thing I understood is that, yeah, she likes it. She hopes that you might have plans to learn it. I understood a little bit. From this test, what I'm gathering as my first contact with Esperanto is I don't understand much. To me, if you have a passion for it, you like the idea of the artificial language. She said it was very easy. That's another thing she said at the end. So if it's very easy and you like it, I know there is a community of Esperanto speakers, so it could be a way to become part of a community, and maybe you share this, brings you pleasure, go for it. But from a like an actual useful point of view, anytime, even if it's so much easier than all other European languages, even if it were that much easier, any hour that you put into Esperanto is not worth, in my opinion, 15 minutes in either Spanish or English.
Okay, so there's one thing I want to take out of this, because it can be insulting to Esperanto speakers, and especially those whose native language is Esperanto, and it has been for several generations within their family. To them, it's a minority language, it's a family, a heritage language, it's important to them, and it would be the equivalent of saying to an Irish person, there's no point learning that language, it's a complete waste of time. At the end of the day, learning a language takes a lot of time, no matter what language it is. So if you want to learn a language, make sure you're doing it because you actually want to learn it. So whether spending an hour on Esperanto or 5 minutes on French, whatever one's more useful, it's up to you to make that determination at the end of the day. But the idea for everyone that, an hour spent on Esperanto is a waste compared to, say, let's say French, for me personally is complete bullshit, because I see French as a complete waste of my time. I'm not going to go to France anytime soon, and if I do, I'll just speak English. I've been to France once before. I'm probably never going to go to Africa, or at least the French-speaking areas. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, I don't know. And there's like a couple of French territories which I doubt I'll ever go there, and the one that's closest to Australia, because Australia is their biggest number of tourists, they also speak a lot of English over there, so I've got no problem there. So for me, learning French is a complete and utter waste of my time. I have no interest in the language, and it's not going to help me in any way possible. However, Esperanto, on the other hand, has helped me massively. I have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in investment via Esperanto-speaking investors. I won't go into details about that because that is private information, but it has been of economic value to me. I have landed jobs via it and made money via it, and I've also traveled the world using it. I've stayed with Esperanto speakers. They've helped me out of tough places when I've been overseas, so basically come to my rescue in a way. And I've had some of the most awesome experiences just via the Esperanto speaking community. And a great example is I ended up in Switzerland and I needed a place to stay, me and my wife. I randomly reached out to the local Esperanto association, and within a few hours they hooked me up with a house that was overlooking the Swiss lakes there. It was prime location. This is 5-star hotel location, but it was literally on the water. And when we came to this house, they were like, oh yeah, we heard about your predicament. That's cool. Here's the keys. We're going to Italy for a bit. Just, make sure you lock up when you're done. And we just stayed there for a week in this Esperanto speaker's house, just because we had this cultural connection between us and this trust as a result of that connection type of thing. So it has been a massive benefit to my life. Now, as I always say, I don't care if you learn the language, but don't degrade the language. That's the only thing I don't like, is when people say, oh, it's of no value, it's no use, don't do this. And I know that's not Metatron's intentions right now, but it is a common thing that people say, and then it gets heard by other people and they repeat it. Consider Esperanto like any minority language out there, because it is 130 years old, it has developed basically its own culture, it has native speakers, although the number is not great, it has rich literature, etc., etc. And if you just say it's of no use, you're basically insulting those people. Now, maybe you want to insult them. Well, I guess that's fine, but that'd be the same as insulting any minority language, speakers of minority languages. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, I don't know what else I want to say on this topic. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Overall, got nothing but love for Metatron, love the guy. Obviously, his opinions on Esperanto are contradictory to my own, but, I get the feeling that if we ever meet up one day and we hang out for a bit, he probably will see it in a different light. Catch us all.